Part 39. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Gongzi. Chapter 381. Candied Halu. Steamed stuffed bun. The streets of Yueyang were filled with mist. Vendors pushing carts shouted among the early risers. Fishermen carrying fishing nets stepped onto fishing boats parked by the lake. On the road near the dock, two dignified and beautiful women were walking together. Mrs. Lu changed back to her usual attire, with a shawl draped over her shoulders and a small package on her back. She walked with her head restlessly and raised her hands to wipe her tears from time to time. She looked like a little daughter-in-law who had been kicked out of the house, attracting the attention of many women. Yunu, who had not yet woken up, followed beside her with blank eyes, holding a small box containing jewelry and money in her arms. Seeing Mrs. Lu's appearance, she did not dare to ask. It was not until she reached the pier that she had the courage to speak. "Road. Madam, where are we going?" Mrs. Lu's eyes were dazed. "Go back to the capital." "Back to Chang'an? This place is more than 1,000 miles away from Chang'an." Yunu has grown up with Mrs. Lu since she was a child. Even if she is a maid, she is still serving the legitimate daughter of a prominent family and has never traveled far alone. Madame Lu suddenly wanted to return to the capital. She didn't make any arrangements for her itinerary, and she didn't take any guards with her. She even took the jewelry with her. Isn't this looking for robbery? As a personal maid, Yunu naturally had to consider Madame Lu's safety, so she raised her hand and took Madame Lu's arm. "Madam, there are only two of us, and we don't have any guards. What should we do if we are betrayed?" Mrs. Lu was confused and thought for a moment. "Go to the Yamen to say hello, give Prime Minister Xiao's name, and ask the Yamen to arrange an official ship to take me back." Seeing that Mrs. Lu had decided to leave, Yunu persuaded her softly, "Why do you have to go back to Chang'an all of a sudden? At least say hello to the young prince." Mrs. Lu panicked when she heard Su Buling. "Don't say hello to him. I have nothing to do with him. I won't be his aunt anymore, go quickly. Do you believe I can find someone on the street to marry you off?" Well, Yunu knew that Mrs. Lu was angry and did not dare to say anything. Knowing that there must be guards watching behind her, she walked listlessly towards the Yamen of Yueyang, turned the corner and stopped to look secretly, hoping to wait for Mrs. Lu to calm down before persuading her. People are coming and going on the long street, and all kinds of things in the market are right in front of you. Mrs. Lu stood alone under the eaves of the street. As the legitimate daughter of the Jinling Lu family, she had been held in the palm of her hand since the day she was born. She was hugged before going out. This was the first time she stood alone on the street like this. Fastest update mobile version. She was beautiful, so she naturally attracted attention, and many people looked at her in confusion. Mrs. Lu was in a daze. After she noticed the scrutinizing gazes of passers-by, she remembered that there were no guards around her. Maybe he didn't feel comfortable with it, so he turned around and hid in the corner of the eaves, carrying the small package and continuing to be lost in thought. Mrs. Lu naturally remembered clearly what happened last night. When she woke up, she felt that the sky was falling. How could she do such a shameless thing? Mrs. Lu felt cold all over when she thought about it, and she wished she could throw herself into a lake to prove her innocence. For women from aristocratic families, reputation and family dignity are far more important than life. The reason why Xiao Xiang'er wanted to die was because he was afraid of losing the face of the Xiao family in Huainan. The same is true for Mrs. Lu. She has lived alone in the Xiao family for 10 years without ever crossing the border, and not even a single rumor has been spread. "I thought that I was very chaste and would never remarry or lose my integrity in this life. I would not even have such thoughts. But last night..." Mrs. Lu clearly remembers what she said and did. After just 2 glasses of wine, he lost control of his words and actually told Linger about the New Year's Eve. Ling didn't know it before. She just thought she was drunk. As long as she didn't tell anyone, no one in the world would know. But now your child knows. Regardless of whether you know it or not, it can be explained by the fact that Su Buling was drunk at the time, but why did he describe it in front of Ling last night, and somehow untied his clothes and asked Ling to repeat it again? Mrs. Lu lightly stamped her feet, and tears immediately came out. I have to admit that in the past, when I was half asleep and half awake, I would dream about the New Year's Eve scene, and I would also recall that indescribable feeling in my heart. But ideas are ideas, and as long as you don't do them, they don't exist. Now that she has done the thing, she still does it in front of your child. Your child is sober, so how will she behave in the future? She wanted to explain that she was drunk and pretended not to remember, but she clearly remembered that she was not drunk at the time, but just lost her mind and went crazy. Ling actually went along with the situation and kissed her on the mouth. This shows that Ling also has other thoughts about her aunt, and does not regard her as an elder at all. Mrs. Lu was really panicked. She sobbed twice and squatted in the corner, hugging her knees and not knowing what to do. She is responsible for taking care of Ling and is Ling's elder. How could she do such a thing? Mrs. Lu bit her lower lip and was in a daze for a long time. Suddenly, a pair of snow-white boots appeared in front of her. They were made by her own hands and looked very familiar. Aunt Lu. A familiar voice sounded from above, friendly and gentle, but it no longer sounded as warm as before. Mrs. Lu's body stiffened, she quickly raised her hand to wipe the corners of her eyes, and stood up in her usual dignified and steady manner, "Your Majesty." As soon as the words came out of her mouth, she saw the bright smile in front of her, and she remembered that she was lying on the bed last night. Su Buling's voice choked up at the scene in his arms. Su Buling smiled kindly, looked down at Mrs. Lu, whose pear blossoms were covered with rain, and said with a smile, "Why do you want to return to the capital all of a sudden? Are you tired of waiting on the ship?" His expression was calm and nothing strange, no different from the past, as if nothing happened last night. Mrs. Lu's eyes were red, her hands were folded on her waist, she didn't dare to look at Su Buling, she just said in a trembling voice, "I'm going back to the capital, don't follow me." Su Buletin raised his hand to block the way. He looked around and saw no one was around, so he got a little closer. "Aunt Lu, was I drunk again last night and made you angry?" "I can't remember." When Mrs. Lu heard this, she felt a little lucky in her heart, but the luck soon dissipated. She remembered clearly that Su Buling was not drunk at all last night. She held Su Buling's hand and put it on his chest. She could clearly feel that Su Buling's body was tense and a little nervous. She remembered her reaction and expression clearly. She was the one who deliberately seduced. Mrs. Lu's eyes were panicked, she raised her hand and pushed Su Buling. "You let me go, with you, how can I do anything?" After choking up a few words and feeling ashamed, he hit the wall. Su Buling was quite helpless. He raised his arms and hugged Mrs. Lu, took out his handkerchief and wiped the corners of his eyes, comforting her softly. "Aunt Lu was drunk last night. It's normal to lose her temper after drinking. I've also lost my temper after drinking, so don't take it to heart. I'm drunk. I'm obviously not drunk, I remember everything. But if he wasn't drunk, how could he have done such a ridiculous thing?" Mrs. Lu stared into Su Buling's eyes, knowing that he was just pretending, just to comfort herself. Both of them remembered that it was indeed done. But no matter what happened, Mrs. Lu was reluctant to leave Su Buling after all. She never wanted to leave in this life, even if Su Buling did something even more extreme to her. In the end, what could she do but accept? Mrs. Lu was silent for a long time. She may have realized that her feelings for Su Buling had changed a long time ago, or that they were wrong from the beginning, but she found it difficult to accept this fact. In the end, she followed this excuse and said in a trembling voice, "You know I'm drunk." Su Buling nodded seriously. She must be drunk, everyone knows Aunt Lu's integrity. Mrs. Lu took a few breaths, then suddenly changed her tone and scolded with wide eyes. "You knew I was drunk, why didn't you stop me?" Su Buling blinked, knowing that Aunt Lu was looking for a step for him, and threw the pot on his head. Naturally, he couldn't argue with this, and lowered his head to look guilty and remorseful. "It's me who is obsessed with things. Can Aunt Lu forgive me?" What else could Mrs. Lu say? With tears in the corners of her eyes, she said softly, "You are still young, so you have to be careful in the future. I drank too much yesterday, so just pretend it never happened, but don't tell others." Su Buling nodded, "You know your mistake." Mrs. Lu hummed, carrying the small package on her back, somewhat unsure of where to go. Su Buling raised his hand to take the package and chuckled. "Go home, breakfast is ready and waiting." Mrs. Lu glanced at Su Buling, hesitated for a moment, then turned and walked towards the building boat. The street was noisy, and the two people were walking side by side, probably because they were relatively speechless when they got along for the first time. Silence is not indifference, but a crack in the high wall that is hard to shake, and the sudden changes make people feel at a loss what to do. Mrs. Lu remained silent, and Su Buling didn't say much either. She just let her think about the situation of the two of them. Responsibility is always more important than desire. For Su Buling, as long as they stay together forever, it doesn't matter what their status is. Being too eager will only be counterproductive. When she returned to the building, Mrs. Lu gradually returned to her usual appearance, dignified, quiet and polite. She seemed to have forgotten everything about what happened last night. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 382. After returning to the building, Calm returned to the ship. Xiao Xiang ran over and curiously asked Mrs. Lu why she suddenly wanted to leave. Mrs. Lu naturally pretended to be stupid, explaining that it was too boring on the boat and just went out for a walk. Xiao Xiang allowed Xiao Xiang to make insinuations and didn't say anything about last night. Xiao Xiang was smart and knew that something must have happened between Mrs. Lu and Su Buling, so she wanted to escape in a hurry. "The medicine last night seemed to be effective. It was a pity that I couldn't cook the rice. But as long as you're on board, there are plenty of opportunities." Su Buling comforted Mrs. Lu, and then continued to take Nightingale Manzi to Juncheon Island to look for Ning Qingyi. Ning Yuhi was injured in the shoulder and had difficulty moving. He did not follow today and stayed on the boat to recuperate. Time passed like this from early morning to dusk. The rain had stopped. The number of pedestrians on the lakeside streets had increased several times. The bustling scene that had not been seen in the previous few days finally appeared. Xiao Xiang had nothing to do on the ship. Seeing the beautiful night view of Yueyang, she took Mrs. Lu out for shopping. In order to cover up what happened last night, Mrs. Lu did not dare to show any signs of strangeness, so she naturally followed her off the ship and took away most of the guards. Zhongli Jiju, who had been waiting all day, finally found a chance to be alone, and quickly carried the medicine bowl to Ning Yuhi's room. Everyone on the boat had left, leaving only a few maids cooking and guards, and it was very quiet. Zhongli Jiju pushed open the door of the room with her shoulder, walked into the room with a medicine bowl, and looked up to see Ning Yuhi meditating on the bed. Because she lived with Zhu Manzi, there was also a hanging of Zhu Lao Sword Master in the room. There are 3 burnt sticks of incense stuck under the portrait. Ning Yuhi suffered a skin injury, and his face showed no change. He saw Zhongli Jiju coming in with a medicine bowl. Although he didn't like Zhongli Jiju very much, he was still polite when being taken care of. He nodded slightly and said, "Thank you. Thank you. What happened back then is over. Now we are on the same boat and we should help each other." Zhongli Jiju placed the medicine bowl on the small table beside the bed, raised her hand and untied Ning Yuhi's white skirt, revealing her snow-white shoulders and lotus belly band. They were both women, and Ning Yuhi didn't hesitate. He turned his back to Zhongli Jiju, and he could see a black and green slap mark on his delicate shoulder, like an ink stain on white rice paper. Zhongli Jiju sighed, dipped a white cloth in the potion, wiped the bruises, and said softly, "Drink the medicine, and depending on the situation, you will be back to normal in 7 or 8 days at most." Ning Yuhi showed a snow-white arm, which looked like Guangong scraping bones to heal wounds. He raised his hand to pick up the medicine bowl and took a sip. As for whether Zhongli Jiju would be poisoned, she was not worried. Although there is an irresolvable conflict with Zhongli Jiju is indeed not a big evil person. At most, he can make her feel disgusting within a tickle powder. If Zhongli Jiju really dared to do evil, she would just file a complaint with Su Buling and kick Zhongli Jiju out, so there was no need to be on guard. Zhongli Jiju saw Ning Yuhi finish drinking the increased amount of medicine, his fox-like eyes showed a bit of brilliance. He pushed Ning Yuhi down to stretch his muscles, bones and blood, and chatted calmly. "It was quite ridiculous when I think about it. I shouldn't have argued with you. If Bakuai's incident hadn't happened, we might still have become good friends." Ning Yuhi lay on the pillow, his expression as calm as ever. "If you don't fight with me, how come you met me?" "That's true." Zhongli Jiju smiled brightly, waited for a moment, and said casually, "Actually, it's not that I want to fight, it's just that I can't hold my breath. Based on my appearance, I can obviously be the 8th leader, but it's just bad luck that prevented me from being drawn. Don't you deny this?" Ning Yuhi frowned and thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, "Bagui is not only about appearance, but also ability and political integrity. Su Danking doesn't draw you, not because he thinks you are not good looking, but because he has evil intentions." Zhongli Jiju could hear that this was what he was saying, and he suddenly became unhappy. "I haven't done anything evil. If I don't say anything else, I have been practicing medicine since I was a child. I must have saved more people than you and Su Danking, right? Why do you guys have it? Do you think I have a bad intention?" Ning Yuhi did not deny this. "I don't have medical skills, so you can save more people than me. But you are too utilitarian. Well, you lack respect for others and have problems with your own cultivation. This is the main reason." Zhongli Jiju naturally couldn't listen to the truth, and snorted lightly. "Anyway, I have saved more people than you. Those people I saved will thank me. If I hadn't researched the solution to the locking dragon goo, Su Buling would have already died due to dragon lock goo. You can't help but admit it, right?" Ning Yuhi frowned slightly. "Your method is too shameful. In order to save yourself and harm the woman. Fortunately, your son is affectionate and righteous. If it were someone else, I don't know what kind of trouble would have happened. As long as it works, I didn't pass on the solution." Zhongli Jiju thought for a while and asked, "How did you accept Su Buling as your apprentice?" Ning Yuhi smiled softly, "I don't know. Anyway, I happened to meet Su Buling. Mrs. Lu and Miss Yang mentioned it and Su Buling became my master. Do you want to be Linger's master? I guess there's no chance. If I don't agree, he will definitely not agree." Zhongli Jiju's chest rose and fell, and he suppressed his anger and said with a smile, "That's not necessarily true. Let's talk about Ba Kui. Let's ignore the inner character and just look at the appearance. I am the most beautiful woman in the world. Is that okay?" Ning Yuhi said lightly, "Don't be sentimental. You are not as good looking as me. Do you know how many people want to marry me?" Zhongli Jiju's eyes darkened. He resisted the urge to strangle Ning Yuhi to death, gritted his teeth and said, "Really? This is up to the man. You were forced to become a monk. Do you have a man you like in your heart?" Ning Yuhi was silent for a while, sighed softly, and was about to say something in her heart, but footsteps sounded from the deck, and she hurriedly ran to the door and said, "Miss Zhongli, something happened in the CAO family of Junshan, the little prince invites you to go over." It was a guest of the palace. Zhongli Jeju and Ning Yuhi both looked serious when they heard it. Su Buling could come back to ask for help, so the matter must be serious. Zhongli Jeju stood up and frowned and asked, "Who is coming from the Eagle Tower? Su Buling can't deal with it." The guest of the palace said in a deep voice, "It's a big battle. Miss Zhongli has the dragon locking goo. The little prince invites you to go over to be prepared." Zhongli Jeju knew that this was a good opportunity to accept Su Buling as an apprentice, so she stood up and prepared to go out. Ning Yuhi also sat up, put on her clothes and went to get the long sword hanging on the wall. Seeing this, Zhongli Jeju raised her hand and said, "You stay here quietly. You are a wounded soldier. If you run over there, will you be a drag? I can't save you." Ning Yuhi wanted to argue a little, but there was a conflict between Dainglu and Junshan Cao's family. If she ran over there without being injured, she would only be a bystander. After thinking about it, she had to sit down. "You guys be careful." Zhongli Jeju nodded, went back to the house to get a lot of bottles and jars, and took a boat with the palace guards to Junshan Island across the lake. It's the end of the month, please vote for me. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 383. After going out in the early morning, Su Buring came to Junshan Island again. The island was very big and there were no communication tools. The other party deliberately hid it, and finding it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. From early morning to afternoon, it was getting dark and nothing could be found. Su Buring returned to the market on the island, ordered 2 side dishes in the tavern, and looked at the tourists and quacks on the street. The scene of his intimate contact with Aunt Lu last night was still in his mind. Ning Yuhi was not around, so Zhu Manzi naturally took possession of his Mr. Su. At this time, he was sitting opposite, holding a bowl of white rice and taking a few secret glances. It's not easy to interrupt when it's a big matter. After sitting for a while, he picked up a large chicken drumstick with chopsticks and placed it in Su Buling's bowl. Su Buling came back to his senses and smiled softly, "It seems that I can't find it. I'll go back after dinner. Let's talk about it tomorrow." Zhu Manzi had been running around looking for 2 days and was already tired of searching. At this time, he thought about it. "I've asked everything that needs to be asked. Xiaoning must be hiding and not wanting to come out. It will be the same if I continue to search. Well, we can think of other ways to force Xiaoning to come out." Su Buletinling ate his meal slowly and motioned to continue. Zhu Manzi looked around, leaned a little closer, and said mischievously, "I guess Xiaoning must be staring at us in the dark. She is very thin-skinned, otherwise the young master would stand on the roof and yell. Try it." Su Buling shook his head, "I've tried it a long time ago. King Yi doesn't want to come out, and he won't move even if he hears it." "That's the wrong thing to say." Zhu Manzi shook his head and encouraged seriously, "If the young master wants to shout, 'King Yi, I like you, and I don't want to live without you,' I promise not to say 3 times, and Xiaoning will carry it." The sword came out. Su Buling thought about it carefully, "Good idea." Then he stood up and prepared to go to the roof. Zhu Manzi's smiling expression froze, and he quickly raised his hand to hold Su Buling's sleeve. "Mr. Su, I'm joking, are you really shouting?" Su Buling's expression was calm. "What else?" Zhu Manzi was stunned for a moment, looked at Su Buling carefully for a moment, then let go of his hand and made the stool again. "Then you shout." He looked like he was waiting to see what happened. Naturally, Su Buling would not stand on the roof to express his love to the air for no reason. Seeing that Zhu Manzi was not fooled, he felt embarrassed for a moment, and raised his hand to flick her head in a funny way. Okay, my family Manzi has learned to be smart. Zhu Manzi snorted lightly. That's right, he was still a little proud. Some of the guests in the tavern were those who took advantage of the nice weather to visit the island, and there were also people from all walks of life. While Su Buling was chatting, he saw a man walking in quickly, whispering a few words next to a table of charlatans, and then several people paid and left. Su Buling didn't pay attention at first, but when he looked at the street from the corner of his eye, he found that there were many people from all walks of life walking towards the island in small groups. It was getting dark, and the tourists on the street were all walking towards the ferry to prepare to leave the island. These people were walking towards the island. The sword-armed charlatan stands out among the crowd as he swims upstream. Zhu Manzi didn't notice this difference. When Su Buling stopped talking, he asked doubtfully, "What's wrong? Something seems to have happened on the island." Su Buling put down his bowls and chopsticks, stood up and took a look at the window. Unexpectedly, he saw a familiar figure, Ning Qingyi, who had been looking for no trace for several days, actually rose and fell from the house in the market, heading towards Come This Way. Farewell to the capital. Nearly 10 months passed in the blink of an eye. Ning Qingyi was not wearing the fairy-like white dress, but the Jianghu attire when they first met, wearing a bamboo hat, a light blue robe, and a protective shield on her hand. Wrist, Qingfeng's sword slanted on his back. The dress is quite low-key, but the tall figure is extremely eye-catching. The cheeks under the bamboo hat have no expression at all, the lips are thin and the eyebrows are picturesque, showing a bit of coldness that is alienating people from thousands of miles away. Su Buling's eyes lit up and he raised his hand to wave from the window of the tavern. Ning Qingyi obviously came here specifically for him. Seeing that Su Buling didn't stop, she reached the street after a few ups and downs. Zhu Manzi naturally saw it too, his eyes full of surprise. He ran to the window and started to scold. "Xiaoning, you have figured it out. We have been looking for you for 2 days and we thought you were sold." Ning Qingyi's expression was very calm, as if she didn't feel anything. Unfortunately, after seeing Su Buling's face, her eyes subconsciously dodge, revealing her inner thoughts. Ning Qingyi walked outside the window and looked at the young man in white who was as gentle and elegant as ever. He raised his hands and clasped his fists in a salute. "Mr. Su, full of branches." Su Buling was as enthusiastic as ever. He said, "Miss Ning, you have finally shown up. I am worried about your safety these days. I don't think about food or tea every day." Zhu Manzi snorted slightly. Ning Qingyi didn't like men who were talkative. She turned around and wanted to leave, but hesitated for a moment and said in a deep voice, "Mr. Su, please respect yourself. I came to you for help, not to reminisce about the past." Su Buling walked out of the tavern with a friendly smile. "Based on our relationship, it would be too much to ask for help. We haven't seen each other for so long. Let's go in and sit down and talk. You are my senior sister now." Ning Qingyi shook her head. "The matter is urgent, I'll keep it short. The CAO family has been very kind to me. Recently, I was targeted by Dainglu. It is rumored that they are here for revenge. The CAO family has withdrawn from the world, and I am worried that something will happen to the CAO family. Staying here, I don't want to involve the young master and the master, so I haven't shown up yet." Su Buling frowned slightly when he heard this. "Have you attacked Yinglu?" Ning Qingyi nodded. "We just arrived at Kajiazhuang. The leader is Zhen Yushan, the old leader of Qingcheng sect, and there are martial arts masters from all over the country. There are more than 30 people. I am no match for my martial arts friends who came to help the CAO family, so I want to ask Mr. Su to go over and say something to the CAO family." "Zhen Yushan." Zhu Manzi's face became serious, and he said seriously, "He is a fierce bandit with a grade A in the detective department. He is as powerful as my father. The Cao family is in trouble this time. Big trouble. Su Buling looked at Xiao Manzi next to him. He knew that the sword Saint Zulu would definitely be there. He thought that Zulu would come alone with the sword, but he didn't expect that a group of people would come. Zheng Yushan of Western Shu, like Xuechenzi of Jiangnan and Chen Chong of northern Xinjiang, was a powerful figure who dominated one side. It's not easy to deal with this one person, not to mention the future father-in-law who is at the peak of his power. Su Buling thought for a moment and gently dissuaded him, the water of Cao family is deep, I may not be able to defeat it, don't wade into this muddy water. Ning Qingyi shook his head, a drop of water should be repaid with a spring. You saved my life. If you are in trouble, I will also risk my life to help you. Cao family helped me when I was desperate. I must help. If you don't want to intervene, I won't force it. Ning Qingyi clasped his fists and turned to leave. Su Buling was a little helpless. Don't be so anxious, I didn't say I won't help you, go and see the situation first. Zhu Manzi patted his chest, Xiaoning, I am your master's sister, we are all people of the world. How can I stand idly by when you are in trouble? We will accompany you. As he said, he followed with a sword, but unfortunately, he was brought back by Su Buling just after taking 2 steps. Su Buling knew that Zulu was also there, so he couldn't bring Manzi with him, so he said softly, Manzi, go find Yang and ask her to find some help for me, then you go back to the boat and wait. Ning Qingyi also said, Manzi, you don't know any kung fu, you won't cause trouble if you follow us, go back. Zhu Manzi suddenly became listless, knowing that there was no point in following him except to watch the fun, so he could only nod and turn to walk towards the market. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 384. It was already dark. Outside Kajiazwang, located in the center of Junshan Island, nearly 100 Cao clan members gathered under the stone archway, holding hoes, shovels and other farm tools. There were still many Jianghu people standing in front of them with swords in their hands, headed by Lin Yuzong, the young master of Hutu Mountain. They all came spontaneously to help the Cao family. Although the more than 100 male members of the Cao family are holding farm tools, they are obviously much more powerful than the Jianghu knights in front of them. The Jianghu family has been passed down for hundreds of years, and the imprint of martial arts is deeply rooted in the bones. Even after selling crabs for 10 years, the Cao family is still the Cao family. Definitely not comparable to ordinary copycat gangs. The archway is built on a white stone avenue leading to the square in front of the island. At the end of the road, there are more than 30 men in black standing, each holding a sword in his hand, motionless. In the night, they are like a statue asking for life. Among them then there were Zheng Yushan and Chang Shijian. The Jianghu people who came over to help the Cao family were mostly warriors who had been taken care of by the Cao family when they were young or had good connections in the neighborhood. The strongest was only the young master of Hutishan, who was also a wealthy family in Chu. His passion could not make up for the gap in hard power. Are all a little panicked now? Lin Yuzong is considered the number 1 among the younger generation in Chu. He was the one who took the lead in supporting the Cao family this time. His face was obviously ugly at this time. Lin Yuzong dared to challenge Chen Daizai to a duel. He was very confident in his own strength, but confidence comes from self-confidence. The world is not a child's play. The fight with Chen Daizai and Su Buling was just a sparring match. At most, it would be embarrassing to lose. Zheng Yushan is not as powerful as Chen Daizai, but now he is serious. If he is not careful, he will die on the spot. No matter how confident Lin Yuzong was, he was never confident enough to kill Zheng Yushan unscathed in a life-and-death fight. Fortunately, Dainglu did not come directly to exterminate the family. At this time, He had no intention of taking action and just stood 100 steps away and waited quietly. The young men of the CAO family have arrived, but the two CAO brothers who are the head of the family have not shown up yet. There were also many people watching the excitement around Kajiazwang. In order not to cause misunderstanding or be harmed, they all stood in the woods on the short mountains in the distance to watch. Su Buling and Ning Qingyi hurried to the vicinity of Kajiazwang and passed by a pavilion. In the pavilion stood several people watching the excitement, talking in low voices. I'm afraid the CAO family is doomed this time. Many of Zheng Yushan's friends died at the hands of the imperial court. He took the lead here today and will definitely not let it go. I heard that the CAO family has become the eagle dog of the court. Why don't you call the officers and soldiers over? The boat crew must have been greeted. The ferries have stopped. The island is only allowed to leave but not enter. The police officers can't get through at all. Besides, it's useless to come with hundreds of police officers. Zheng Yushan can kill just one person. It still depends on the CAO family themselves. Su Buling heard these conversations and looked at Ning Qingyi, who was busy walking next to him. Miss Ning, do you know about Song Ying? Ning Qingyi looked solemn, walked from the hiding place to the big archway, and said softly. I've heard that he is the unfilial son of Cao Kujian. He was originally the young master of the Cao family and later defected to the government. It seems that senior Cao's family withdrew from the world because of this incident. I don't know the details. But senior Cao he is by no means a lackey of the imperial court. He is highly respected in the world of martial arts. People in the world of martial arts can solve their own problems. Even if they have the ability to ask the government for help today, they will not do that. Su Buling shook his head slightly when he heard this. There has always been a clear distinction between Jianghu and the imperial court. Some Jianghu people would rather die than cooperate with the government after being caught and tortured, and would not even disclose information about their opponents. To put it nicely, this is called Jianghu rules and integrity, but the reason for the formation of this rule is simply that most Jianghu forces are unclean, smuggling, committing murders, collecting protection fees, etc. The little money earned by opening a martial arts gym and escorting escorts simply cannot do it. Big. The means by which Jianghu people make a living are precisely prohibited by the imperial court. To seek refuge with the government as a whistleblower would cut off the Jianghu people's financial path. It is normal to kill the whole family in retaliation. This rule has been formed over time. Of course, the imperial court is not always on the right side. There are many corrupt officials who plunder the people's wealth, and there are even more Jianghu people who care about the world. There is nothing wrong in not compromising with corrupt officials. Su Buling thought for a moment and said, I am also a member of the imperial court. I cannot treat everyone who cooperates with the imperial court as a lackey. Ning Qingyi shook her head. Everyone in the world has a criminal record and cannot be an official. Those who are able to become successful are mostly betraying their relatives and friends to perform meritorious service. Moreover, killing one's own people is far more vicious than the officials of the imperial court. What do you call this if not a running dog? Su Buling thought for a while. If you want to join the imperial court and prosper, you don't have to betray your friends. You can also betray your sex. Ning Qingyi obviously had no intention of letting Su Buling tease him at this time, and said seriously, Jianghu people will inevitably betray their trust by seeking refuge in the imperial court. Just like me, I killed the wolf guard. If a friend who knew about this defected to the imperial court and became an official, he would arrest him. Or don't you arrest me? If you arrest me, it's a breach of trust. If you don't arrest me, you're disloyal to the court and derelict in my duties. I'm not a human being inside or outside. Therefore, the affairs of Jianghu people have always been resolved by themselves. If senior Cao seeks support from the government, he will be in the Jianghu. It means everyone is rebelling against their relatives. This explanation was spot on. Su Buling nodded. In that case, Jianghu is not interesting. Ning Qingyi didn't talk much, so she didn't delve into this issue in detail. She came to a stop near the archway. Su Buling didn't want to show his face yet, so he stood behind a big tree and watched the development of the matter. Hundreds of people stood under the archway, and the quiet sound of pinned ropes could be heard, with only the occasional crisp sound of torches popping out. After waiting for about half an hour, the crowd separated into a path. Cao Kui, the second head of the Cao family, walked out of the village wearing a military robe, holding a sword box in his hand. He still had a pleasant expression and a smile. He walked to the front of the crowd and said to the people in Eagle Tower, "Everyone has been waiting for a long time. My brother is not feeling well and cannot see the guests. I heard that the headmaster Zheng came to ask for a string of sword spikes. My Cao family has withdrawn from the world and left the sword to squander it. This family heirloom Zanlu sword was handed over to me. Everyone, I hope Master Zheng can find a good master for him." As soon as these words came out, the whole place was noisy. Even the people in Daying Tower were a little stunned, whispering to each other, and Chang Shijian's eyes were even more intense. Lin Yuzong immediately became anxious and turned around to stop him. "Senior Cao must not do it. How can I give this sword to a group of gangsters?" Su Buling is not surprised by everyone's reaction. There are only a few famous swords in the world such as Zanlu, Chengying, and Zayadan. The Zayadan sword on his waist is the one that King Su and Princess Su have searched all over the world for. I don't know how much effort it took to get it. Among the four major swordsmanship families, only the Cao and Lu families had it. The Zhu family's sword was confiscated by the imperial court and hidden in the emperor's inner treasury. The Tang family had been begging for it for more than 100 years but never got it. It can be seen that how valuable it is. Dayinglu came here just to ask for a bunch of sword tassels. The Cao family handed over all the swords directly. It was obviously too polite. Even Ning Qingyi couldn't stand it and said softly, "This sword has been kept in the Cao family's ancestral hall for hundreds of years. The successive family heads were reluctant to use it as a weapon. How could we just hand it over like this?" Su Buling picked up his sword and looked at it. "Do you want it?" Ning Qingyi was stunned for a moment, frowned and said, "Only when a sword meets a good owner can it live up to its illustrious reputation. I can't afford it. I wouldn't even dare to take it if it's given to me." Su Buledenling thought so and chuckled without saying anything more. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 385. Everyone in Dayinglu was noisy for a moment and then fell silent again. Zhen Yushan, standing in front, raised his hands and cupped his fists. "Zheng is not worthy of this sword, nor does he want it. I came here today only for two things. One is the string of sword tassels that the Cao family obtained from the previous dynasty, and the other is the 9 heads in the Cao family's house. None of them can be missing." Wow! As soon as these words came out, the people outside the archway became angry, and some even cursed. Ning Qingyi's face was warm and angry. "There are 9 men in total in the Cao family room and senior Cao. The purpose of attacking Yinglu is to kill people. I don't even want to hand over the sword and spike. It is really too much to bully people." Su Buling also frowned slightly. He thought that the attack on the Eagle Tower was just for a string of sword spikes. It was too much to kill the whole family. The Cao family would be damned if they agreed. As expected, after hearing this, the faces of everyone in the Cao family darkened. Cao Kui still had a smile, but it was a little lighter. "Master Zheng, although our Cao family has withdrawn from the world, our Kung Fu foundation is still there. We can't just stand and let others chop us. I hope you can stop waiting." Zhen Yushan snorted lightly. It's because your CAO family withdrew from the world that I didn't take the lives of your whole family when I attacked Yinglu. However, the male members of the eldest family must die. Cao Ying, Cao Kui's son, betrayed his trust and betrayed his friends for glory, and defected to the imperial court. As one of the chief officers of the detective department, you, the Cao family, should know how many families have been killed in the past 10 years. In those days when Iron Eagle was hunting deer, how many gangs in the Chu area were defeated. You, the Cao family, should also know that there are always wrongdoers and debtors. I will only ask Cao's family to repay the life debt. If you don't know what to do, I won't mind adding a few more lives to the Yinglu. Cao Ying was given a national surname by the court, but many people still know about it. Lin Yuzong knew that the Cao family was in the wrong on this matter and said, Senior Zheng, what Cao Ying did has nothing to do with the Cao family in Junshan. Senior Cao Qiujian has expelled him from the family and withdrawn the whole family from the world to give an explanation. You guys, you should go find trouble with Cao Ying. Zhen Yushan took a few steps forward with his sword in hand. In connivance, you harbored a white-eyed wolf and killed countless close friends who respected the reputation of the Cao family. Afterwards, you kicked him out of the house and just quit the world to settle the past grudges. Lin Yuzong said in a deep voice, Senior Cao has never protected Cao Ying, but he was unable to clean up the family and had already severed the relationship with Cao Ying. Many Jianghu people who came to help also opened their mouths to excuse the Cao family. Ning Qingyi could no longer stand at this time, walked nearby and said, Everyone knows that Senior Cao is a benevolent and righteous man, but he was an unfilial son. When I was in trouble, Senior Cao risked being questioned by the court. Give me a helping hand. Instead, you attack Yinglu and commit unjust things in the name of benevolence and righteousness. How can you have the dignity to slander the Cao family? Ning Qingyi wore a bamboo hat to cover her face and stood inconspicuously among the crowd. She originally only opened her mouth to help and say something fair. But after Chang Shijian saw it, he took a step forward and whispered something to Zhen Yushan. Zhen Yushan glanced at Ning Qingyi and smiled a little. Girl Qingyi, do you still remember me? When your mother Pei Yun took you to live in Pei Village, I came to visit the owner of Pei Village and met you once. Hearing the name Qingyi, the Jianghu guests under the archway turned around and saw the little fairy Changqing Guaning, who was very famous in Chudi, also came to help. The morale suddenly rose greatly. Lin Yuzong, who had been a little reluctant to give up, hurriedly standing at the front with his head held high, he looked like he was determined to live and die with the Cao family. Ning Qingyi didn't pay attention to these glances. Seeing that she was recognized, she responded with a cold voice. Senior Zheng is highly respected in the Chu land, I naturally remember it. People in Jianghu have clear grievances. The old master Cao helped me when the stronghold was breached. He is very different from Cao Ying, who is complicit in the evil. I hope Senior Zheng can distinguish between right and wrong and not take revenge. Wrong person. Zhen Yushan lost his sword behind him. Qingyi, don't let the Cao family's small favors deceive you. Do you know why your mother died? Ning Qingyi's face darkened and she held the hilt of the sword. I know clearly that my mother was killed by the wolf guard, but it has nothing to do with Senior Cao. Zhen Yushan shook his head and turned to look at the many Jianghu guests and everyone in the Cao family. You are all young, and you still think that the Cao family is the Cao family who would rather break than bend, and fight against injustice with passion. I don't know what the Cao family did back then. Take Qingyi girl for example, you may not know her mother Pei Yun. The chivalrous girl from the Chu land was originally a young lady from Pei's village, and she went on a trip to the capital. At that time, the late emperor was still there, and the limelight in the world was not so tight, but Pei Yun, a girl, was moral and would never do anything against her will. Later, I met a scholar and fell in love with each other. Ning Qingyi's face darkened slightly, with a bit of resentment in her eyes, but she didn't speak. Su Buling leaned against the big tree and folded his arms, feeling a little confused. While he was listening carefully, he was tapped on the shoulder. Zhongli Jiju walked up to him silently, frowning and looking at him. "This battle is not big, Mr. Su can't handle it. The real owner hasn't arrived yet." Su Buring turned his head and looked. Zhongli Jiju was still dressed like a fairy, but there was a bunch of bottles and cans around his waist. He knew at a glance that they were not good things. Su Buring couldn't help but stay away. After a while, he asked, "You came very quickly, how did you find me?" Zhongli Jiju's true colors, which had been exposed, were now covered up. He raised his finger and pointed at the little sparrow squatting on the branch and taking a nap. "Sister, I'm very capable. Even these 100 people don't have to do it myself." Su Buling was dubious and looked back. "Where are the others?" Nightingale went to the Yamen, Manzi was sent back, and the other guards were hiding nearby. Su Buling felt a little relieved and continued to focus on the confrontation outside the archway. After Zheng Yushan told some stories about Pei Yun buying paintings in the capital to help scholars take the imperial examination, he continued. Later, Pei Yun's money was spent and he was ready to take on a job in Chang'an to earn money. At that time, Cao Ying, the eldest son of the Cao family, was also in Chang'an and had not yet surrendered to the court. He contacted a wave of Jianghu people and took an order to escort the silver coins. Pei Yun was also involved in the business at Fenglingdu. It is said that it is a normal escort, but the amount of money is huge, and the escort at night is full of doubts. However, the reputation of the Junshan Cao family is still there. With Cao Ying's guarantee, Pei Yun and many friends in the world have no doubts. It was only later that I found out that it was official silver. It was stolen from the warehouse by a senior official in the capital. He secretly recruited gangsters to escort him, ransack his house and behead him. After Cao Ying learned the news, he did not tell his friends in the capital. Instead, he reported it to the court and personally escorted Guanyin to the meeting place. When the officers and soldiers rounded up Guanyin, he also took action against his resisting companions. Pei Yun was also there. He was injured at the time and became a wanted criminal by the court, while Cao Ying was recruited by the emperor to become a confidant. Ning Qingyi frowned. She had never heard her parents talk about those old stories. This was the first time she heard about them. There was silence for a moment before speaking. Cao Ying betrayed his trust and defected to the imperial court. Everyone in the world knew about it. He was later expelled from his family. This matter has nothing to do with senior Cao. Zheng Yushan sighed, "If it was just an unfilial son, I would not cause trouble for the Cao family." But after the incident, Cao Qiujian did not give up his son's extraordinary talent, and did not clean up the family. Instead, he relied on his many years of prestige to contact everyone, force the matter to be suppressed. Even the head of Pei village received a letter, persuading your mother Pei Yun not to publicize the matter, until the last moment when Tai Ying hunted a deer and Cao Qiujian was not a human being inside and outside. He was kicked out of his home and retreated into the world. And you must be clear about what happened next. The imperial court swept across the rivers and lakes with thunderous momentum, and knew the details of the major families in the Chu region. Countless people died as a result. The Junshan Cao family, the leader of the Chu region, stood by and watched, and the Cao family, it was the Zhu family in Yuzhu, a family friend. The old swordsman was framed by a villain and died of exhaustion in the battle. The whole family only killed men because it was eunuch Jie who begged for love. The Cao family still stood idly by. Afterwards, I secretly sent you to Wudang Mountain. Just such a small favor can make you wipe out the blood feud in the past. Everyone was in disbelief after hearing these words. Ning Qingyi frowned and looked at Cao Kui next to him. Cao Kui's face was gloomy, neither admitting nor denying. Cao Ying was outstandingly talented at that time, and the burden of revitalizing the Cao family was placed on Cao Ying. He did something wrong in the capital, and his father wanted his prodigal son to turn around, so it was reasonable to cover up those things to preserve his reputation. But in the end, Cao Ying did not look back, and it was too late to clean up the family. When Iron Eagle was hunting deer, everyone in the Jianghu was in danger. Anyone who opposed the court would be killed. His brother Cao Kujian didn't want to drag the whole family to death, and he didn't want to attack his best friend, so he had no choice but to withdraw from the Jianghu and choose not to do so. Take action. But these explanations are obviously meaningless. Breaking one's word means breaking one's word. If the Cao family is in trouble, Sword Master Zhu will definitely come to help at the risk of his life. But if the Zhu family is in trouble, the Cao family has to stand by and watch in order to keep the family young. The choice may be excusable, but the hatred is indeed forged. When Ning Qingyi saw Cao Kui not answering, he gradually understood. There was an incredible look in his eyes, and he stood there not knowing what to say. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Gongzi. Chapter 386. It was dark, and the boats on the lakeside were empty, with no entertainment items, and time passed very slowly. Normally, Ning Yuhi could meditate and practice to pass the time, but she couldn't practice martial arts because of her injured shoulder. She couldn't calm down after hearing the news of the incident on Junshan Island. She kept walking around in the house, worrying about the safety of Su Buling and King Yi. Maybe it was because the house was too boring. Ning Yuhi always felt upset and wanted to find someone to chat with. Her body felt a little suffocated, and she kept thinking about Su Buling's appearance. After staying like this for half an hour, Ning Yuhi knew that she might not be able to help in the past, but she couldn't help it. She changed her clothes and dressed up a little, took the long sword from the wall, got off the boat alone and went to the ferry, wanting to visit Junshan Cao's family. There were many boats at the ferry, but they were all boats returning from Junshan Island. After searching for a long time, no boat went there. Ning Yuhi knew that someone must have sealed off the island, and only allowed people to leave but not enter, so as not to disturb the island's business. The whole Dongting Lake was sealed off, and this must be a trick. Ning Yuhi was even more upset when he saw this. He looked around and found a small fishing boat in a secluded place. He negotiated with the boatman to buy it, and paddled the boat alone to Junshan Island across the lake. Dongting Lake is very large. Under the moonlight, the sky and water are the same color. The starry sky and the silver moon are reflected in the lake. The scenery is beautiful, and Ning Yuhi has no mood to appreciate it. During this period, he saw a few boats leaving the lake, but the distance was too far to see who was sitting on them. Junshan Island is nearly 10 miles away from the ferry in Yueyang. It takes a long time to paddle the boat alone, but Ning Yuhi doesn't feel anything. He was distracted and thought about it for a while, and then he came to the ferry square of Junshan Island. At this time, all the boats at the ferry on the island had left, and there was no one in sight. Ning Yuhi carefully went ashore with his sword in hand. Just as he was about to go in and look for someone, he suddenly saw a young man in white standing by the railing holding a sword case on the empty stone platform at the ferry, with one hand on his waist, looking at the empty lake, looking a little dazed. Ning Yuhi recognized who it was from the back, and her eyes lit up slightly. She ran behind him with her skirt lifted. Ling-er. On the stone platform at the ferry, Su Buling secretly complained that Nightingale was not thoughtful enough and didn't even leave him a boat. He was wondering whether to swim back. Hearing the footsteps and calls from behind, he turned around and saw Ning Yuhi running up to him with a sword in hand. Ning Yuhi rarely dressed up. Her long black silky hair was combed into a popular hanging cloud bun. 2 strands of hair were softly attached to her cheeks. Her face was as white as mutton fat jade. Her rosy little mouth under her nose was dotted with rouge. She also wore 2 crystal jade earrings. She swayed slightly with her footsteps. With her impeccable face, it was not an exaggeration to describe her as a beauty that could topple a country. Su Buling was obviously stunned for a moment. His messy thoughts just now disappeared. Looking at the beautiful woman who ran over, he almost didn't recognize her. Ning Yuhi walked up to her and looked up at the man who was half a head taller than her. She didn't wonder why Su Buling was alone and where King Yi had gone. The first thing she said was, "Are you okay?" I'm fine, Master, you." "I wanted to ask, Master, are you okay?" Thought about it but didn't say it out loud. Su Buling stood up a little straighter. The faint fragrance of Osman thus was faint, and he used a full branch of incense powder. "What is this for?" Ning Yuhi didn't notice Su Buling's abnormality at all, and stood in front of him with a gentle smile. "It's good that you're okay. I thought something went wrong, so I ran over to take a look. In fact, I shouldn't have come over, but I couldn't help wanting to come over." Su Buling's head was full of question marks. After thinking about it, he smiled and said, "Just now, I went to Yinglu to cause trouble for the Cao family, but there was no fight. King Yi had already returned to the boat." "Didn't you meet him?" Ning Yuhi shook his head. "I rode here by myself. I didn't meet him. Maybe I missed him." "Why are you standing here? The boat has run away and can't leave. It's good that you come over. Go back." Su Buling held the sword box and turned to the lake where Ning Yuhi came from. Ning Yuhi walked in front of Su Buling and saw that Su Buling was safe and sound, and felt relieved. From time to time, he looked up and glanced at her, naturally, no longer sneaking around like before. Su Buling came to the small fishing boat, with a fishing net on the bow and the awning clean. Putting the sword box in the awning, Su Buling picked up the oar from the side and pushed the boat away from the lake. Rowing is a technical job. Su Buling must have no experience, and he just circled in the water after leaving the shore. Ning Yuhi sat on a stool in the awning, and seeing Su Buling's clumsy appearance, he chuckled, stood up and let Su Buling take off, took the oar, and skillfully moved the boat left and right, and then drove the boat away from Junction Island. The lake was sparkling, and the scene of a beautiful woman boating under the moon was extremely beautiful. Su Buling sat opposite Ning Yuhi, took a few glances, and casually talked about what happened just now. Cao Ying, the eldest son of the Cao family, defected to the court. He betrayed King Yi's mother before, and was found by Li Han's hung, but the old patriarch of the Cao family still seems to be a moral person, and it is understandable that he is eager to protect his son. "Just like my father, it is reasonable to rebel to save me, and it is also reasonable to disregard my life for loyalty. It is a bit wrong for the people in the martial arts world to hold on to this, and it is even more wrong for the old patriarch Cao to take this as a knot in his heart. In fact, it seems that there is nothing good in the martial arts world now, just a group of gangsters." Ning Yuhi's eyebrows curved, smiling beautifully. "There is nothing good about the Jianghu. When I was young, I also yearned for the Jianghu like you, with fine clothes and horses, swords, chivalrous hearts, and promises worth 1,000 gold. Later, I couldn't help it, so I ran out to take a look. As a result, I didn't see any chivalrous women or knights, but met a lot of human traffickers, and some saw that I was alone and wanted to rob. If I didn't know some kung fu, I would have been robbed long ago." Su Buling looked at Ning Yuhi's face, and seeing that his master didn't mean to be disgusted, he pretended to be innocent and admired him seriously, and continued. "There are very few orthodox Jianghu people, and most of them our life is very tiring. Cao Meng who traveled thousands of miles to save his mother, Zhang Ding who was disheartened, etc., in my opinion, are the real people of the world. That's true, but no matter how few such people there are, as long as there are still some, the world of Jianghu is still interesting. Ning Yuhi rowed the boat slowly, looked at Su Buling, and suddenly said, if Ling was born in the world of Jianghu, he would definitely be a knight respected by everyone. What a pity. Su Buling smiled and said, what a pity? It's a pity that I was born in a royal family and I am destined not to be a knight who breaks the law with force. No. Ning Yuhi thought about it, shook his head and sighed. What a pity, I shouldn't have accepted you as my apprentice. Ask for a monthly ticket, 96th place, today is the only day left at the end of the month. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Zi. Chapter 387. The lake is as flat as a mirror, the ripples caused by the oars spread, and the full moon in the water rises and falls. There was only one small boat on the vast lake. Under the night wind, the whole world became quiet. The men and women in white are sitting on the small boat, far away from the world. Under the reflection of the starry sky, they feel like they are floating in a lonely boat in the river of stars. It's a pity that I shouldn't have accepted you as my apprentice. Ning Yuhi's hair beside her ears swayed gently with the night wind. The paddle in her hand stopped at some point. She just looked at the full moon in the sky and thought of something. There was a bit of longing in her eyes, shining brightly. It was completely different from the gentle and quiet person in the past, and even showed a bit of agility that only a little daughter could have. Su Buling sat in front of him and looked at the moon in the sky. Why? Do you think I'm not suitable to be an apprentice? No. It shouldn't be collected. Ning Yuhi sat quietly on the boat, her green earrings swaying in the night wind, and thought for a while. When I was a child, I was just a concubine. I had no status at all in the prosperous Tang family. I was not even as good as the older maids. My martial arts talent was acceptable, but the swordsmanship of the Tang family was passed down from male to female. Naturally, I was not convinced. At that time, like you, I also longed for the free world. At that time, I thought about becoming a heroine when I grow up, traveling around and doing chivalry, and then I met a Jianghu hero who had the same atmosphere. Let's travel around the world together. Having said this, Ning Yuhi raised his eyes and looked at Su Buling's side face. Do you remember the last time we rode a horseback together after being attacked by assassins outside Chang'an City? Su Buling's memory is still fresh. The belly band is still in the box. How could he forget? Of course I remember that I risked my life to save the master, and the master bandaged my wound. Ning Yuhi pursed his lips and smiled, and continued to look at the moon in the sky. My childhood imagination was just like that. I was a chivalrous girl riding a horse and wielding a sword, traveling around. Suddenly one day, I met a special person in a special place. Maybe we took a boat together, and then we met like that. That man was gentle, elegant, and handsome. He might be a scholar who didn't know martial arts, or he might be a knight with strong martial arts skills. He was kind-hearted and polite in conversation. He happened to look at me one more time, then there were two people riding a horse. Horses travel all over the world. Until one day when we were tired from walking, we went back to the place where we first met, the thatched cottage and bamboo house, raised our children, and lived in peace and quiet until the day we closed our eyes. That's what I imagined the world to be like. Children of the Jianghu, chivalrous and tender, who in the world does not yearn for them? Su Buling had a smile in his eyes. Actually, the Jianghu in my imagination is similar to what Master imagined. Ning Yuhi blinked his eyes and sighed faintly. It's a pity that fate has played a trick on me. Before I grew up, I went astray. I became a queen first, and finally I went to Changqing Temple and became a man who has cut off the world of mortals. Taoist nun, I thought I would never take that path in my life, but I didn't expect that I actually found the knight in my imagination. Ning Yuhi turned his head and looked at Su Buling as he spoke, with a sincere look and a bit of regret. He is handsome, gentle, and elegant, and he is also highly skilled in martial arts. The key is that he also has a chivalrous heart. The only shortcoming is that he is a bit lustful. Su Buletinling originally nodded slowly, but when he heard the last sentence, his face stiffened slightly, looking a little innocent. But I'm very satisfied. I thought that such a man could only exist in my imagination, but I didn't expect that I would meet him so suddenly. It's a pity that I came 10 years too late. I shouldn't have accepted you as an apprentice. After Ning Yuhi finished speaking softly, he looked at the full moon in the lake, showing a bit of disappointment. Su Buletinling was silent for a moment, sat a little closer, pressed closely against Ning Yuhi, and said curiously, "If I didn't become a disciple, would I just?" Ning Yuhi shook his head and naturally rested his head on Su Buling's shoulder, looking at the full moon in the lake. "If we didn't become apprentices, we should be able to be a couple of heroes like we are now. I am a few years older than you, so you wouldn't care." "Of course not." Su Buletinling's body visibly stiffened slightly, his soft hair stuck to his cheeks, and the faint fragrance lingered on the tip of his nose, feeling a little distracted. Ning Yuhi pursed his lips and smiled, then thought for a while, "I really want to get married. I have had enough of being alone in the Taoist temple. I just escaped from the emperor's marriage. No one in the world dares to marry me. You can't even marry the queen mother if you dare to touch me. You should dare to marry me, right? What am I afraid of?" "Alas." Ning Yu rolled her hair around her ears with her jade fingers, and sighed regretfully, "It's a pity that I have accepted you as my apprentice. The master-disciple status is as high as heaven, and you can't mess around. In fact, it's okay to be a master, that's all. By staying with you, I have fulfilled my childhood wish." Having already taken such initiative, Su Buletinling seemed unable to sit still. After a little hesitation, he raised his arms and put his arms around Ning Yuhi's shoulders, and said softly, "Master hasn't taught me anything anyway, so it doesn't count. No. I am a serious woman of the Jianghu, and the master and the disciple are the master and the disciple, but it seems to be God's will. When I left Changqing Mountain at the beginning of the year, I read the fortune for myself, and the hexagram was when you encounter a trapped dragon and it turns into rain. Don't look at it, because if you look at it, it will be difficult to look back. At that time, I thought I could see a real dragon, and I looked for it along the way, but I didn't find it, so I thought the hexagram was fake. In the end, I found out that the trapped dragon was you, and the rain was the Queen Mother. I saw you two doing something. Since you have seen it, you can't look back. Something will definitely happen to us. This is God's will." Su Buling didn't believe it, but at this time, naturally he followed the words and said, "Since it is difficult to change the will of heaven, then find a way. Master expelled me from the sect and followed the will of heaven." Ning Yuhi shook his head gently, "Even if they are expelled from the sect, they are still master and apprentice. How can a master marry his apprentice? If it gets out, people will laugh at him, but since the hexagram has come true, this disaster will come sooner or later. You and I are definitely destined to be together. If there is such a day, you must never tell anyone about it." "This is not a question of whether to tell anyone or not." Su Buling thought for a while, raised his hand, lifted Ning Yuhi's chin, and looked at the white cheek close at hand. "Master, do you like me?" "I." Ning Yuhi's face turned red, showing a rare shyness. She turned her eyes away and thought for a while. "I don't know, but you blocked the arrow for me that time, so I must like you. Riding on the horse, I bandaged you with a belly band for some reason, and I was distracted. I was thinking about these things at the time. Later I found out that you had seen my body. I was not angry at all, but I felt ashamed. I am your master, How could you look at me and hide it from me? I regretted it a few days after leaving Chang'an. You see, I saved me because of you. We are not master and disciple yet. It was probably arranged by God. I took you as my disciple for no reason and ruined things. If I hadn't taken you in, we might have been together. I just like knights. For someone like you, I can only say that fate is playing tricks on me. God deliberately targeted me. Su Buling thought for a while. When I said I would marry you, I really wanted to marry you. Of course, I wanted to take responsibility for my master's body. I don't need you to take responsibility. Ning Yuhi frowned slightly. I am your master, you have to be filial to me. Su Buling spread his hands slightly, speechless. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 388. The moonlight was quiet, and there was no sound on the quiet lake. On the boat, Ning Yuhi, who was wearing a thin white skirt, rested her side face on Su Buling's shoulder again. She gently raised her bare hand and took Su Buling's hand in it, interlocking their fingers. She seemed to like this very much. This feeling, I watched intently, thought for a long time, and then said softly. You have been a life-saving grace to me, and you have looked at my body. I don't hate you, I even admire you. Logically, I should marry you, but I have already become a monk and am your master, so I can't marry you. I don't want to offend morals, but the hexagram says that we are definitely destined to be married, and God's will is inevitable, so I don't know what to do. She whispers softly and repeatedly, and looks no different from a girl who likes her lover but is blocked by her parents. In the dilemma, she can only rely on her lover to complain. Su Buling held the slender jade hand, and the slightly cold and delicate touch felt like a piece of jade. It was impossible to say that there was no evil intention in his heart. I used to think about Bai Mantu all day long, and I never regarded Ning Yuhi as my master. But for some reason, sitting on this vast lake at this moment, after feeling Ning Yuhi's hesitation, Su Buling's heart suddenly became very calm, but he couldn't think of any charming thoughts, and the only man left was protective desire. Well, after I go back, I will spread the news in Jianghu, saying that you are just hired as a retainer of the palace, and you are not my master. It is just a misinformation. When I return from Jiangnan for the wedding, I will just bring you in openly and openly. As for the emperor, I don't care what he thinks and what it has to do with you and me. Ning Yuhi held Su Buling's hand and shook his head gently. I can't marry you, even if I don't have the title of master and apprentice. King Yi is still here, you and King Yi should be a couple, and you will see King Yi when you go back now. I have to keep a distance from you and act like a master. I don't want King Yi to hate me and say that I compete with her for men. Su Buling blinked. It seems so. What should we do? Isn't it impossible to violate God's will? Yes, God's will cannot be violated. Ning Yuhi fell silent, looked at the vast lake with no end in all directions, hesitated for a long time, and whispered. Long-term pain is worse than short-term pain. Sooner or later, you and I will suffer a disaster. Rather than being broken up by King Yi in the future, it is better to break this marriage as soon as possible. From tomorrow on, you can no longer think about me and throw away the belly band and paintings you hide. Throw mine away, keep the others, then forget about it. There is no divination, you have never seen me, and I have never liked you. Hearing such heartless words, Su Buling was naturally unhappy. It's too much to just break it off. It doesn't mean there is a marriage. Master has said that God's will cannot be violated. Ning Yuhi did not answer, but sat up straight, faced Su Buling face to face, took a breath, seemed to have made a lot of determination, and then raised his hand to push Su Buling's shoulder. Su Buletinling didn't even sway. Looking at the breathtaking beauty under the moonlight, he tilted his head slightly, feeling a little confused. Ning Yuhi bit his lower lip, raised his hands, and pushed Su Buling hard into the boat canopy. It's hard to go against God's will. It will happen sooner or later. It's better to make a quick decision and end it as soon as possible before the situation is too deep. As long as I have a marriage with you, the hexagram should be over. From now on, you can forget about this matter. That's it? What kind of brain circuit is this? Su Buling understood this time, leaning on the deck with his elbows, his eyes filled with astonishment. Master, you respect yourself, this is not a joke, Ningyu he was tortured by that hexagram for half a year. He even walked suspiciously. Sometimes he walked in front and sometimes behind him. The more he tried to escape, the deeper he fell. In addition, Ning Qingyi came back. He didn't dare to see his apprentice until this matter was over. Anyway, that's all. Ningyu he ignored Su Buling's struggle, pressed Su Buling's shoulders, condescendingly looked down at that handsome face seriously. I know you are lustful and call me Taoist Bai. You must be thinking about those things in your heart. You have seen it all. In fact, your innocence has been ruined in your hands. It doesn't make any difference if you add more, but only this time, from now on, you must be a gentleman and treat me as a serious master. Also, you are not allowed to take that charming Zhongli Jiju as your master, you only have me as your master. They were so close to each other, their soft hair hanging on their cheeks, tickling their hearts. Su Buling had a rare experience of the baby's perspective for a while, with a strange expression and helplessness. Master, don't be impulsive. If you have something to say, say it properly. What did you say? Do you think I don't know what Taoist master Bai means? Ningyu he pursed his lips, leaned over and nibbled on Su Buling's lips. The four lips met, raw but not awkward at all. Su Buling's eyes widened. He didn't expect Ningyu he to come for real. This time, he was really confused. He turned his head hard to prevent Ningyu he from biting him and said anxiously. Master, are you serious? Have you taken Chinese medicine? As he spoke, he held Ningyu he's wrist and checked, the pulse was stable and nothing abnormal was found. Ningyu he's earrings were swaying. Seeing Su Buling dodge, her eyes showed a bit of annoyance. She raised her hand and turned his face around, and said aggressively. I'm awake, what kind of medicine did I take? I thought for myself, even if I said I couldn't watch, I watched anyway. I must be destined to be married to you. If not, what else could I do? Don't be afraid, just close your eyes for a while and you'll be fine. What's all this? Su Buling was speechless, staring at each other for a moment with big eyes and small eyes. He was in the middle of a lake in the wilderness, and the sky and the earth were not working. What could he do? He had to give up the resistance. Okay, come on. Ningyu he was satisfied, holding Su Buling's face and kneading it carefully, like a little girl admiring her toys. Just as she leaned over, she remembered something and frowned. Ling the book says that I am unlucky for my husband, do you dislike me? I like you so much, how can I dislike you? Su Buling sighed and wanted to persuade him, I'm afraid that master will regret it and run away again. This matter can actually be done slowly, woo woo woo. Ningyu he has been practicing martial arts for many years, and his movements are still a bit wild and not gentle at all. Su Buling really couldn't resist, and after a few symbolic resistances, he turned the tables. The boat rose and fell, and circles of ripples spread outward. After a while, there was a rustling sound, which disturbed the fish swimming around the boat in the lake. After an unknown amount of time, a panicked cry suddenly came from the boat tent. Aling no. I was confused just now. Master, it's like this. Don't, it hurts, woo. Then it became quiet again, leaving only the breeze in the lake and a lonely boat, hovering among the sea of stars. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Zi. Chapter 389. The sky is slightly bright, and the white fish belly is just showing in the east. The lone boat hovered on the vast lake, without wind or waves, as quiet as an ink painting. I don't know when it stopped in the small boat canopy. The man and woman were sleeping in each other's arms, using the sword box as a pillow. The white robe was cushioned on the deck, and the skirt was covered on the body. The belly band embroidered with lotus was thrown aside casually, with a folded white handkerchief with a red plum blooming on it. Su Buling was still sleeping, hugging Ning Yuhi with his arms as a pillow, his expression as cold as ever. Ning Yuhi opened his eyes wide and looked at the white handkerchief in front of him, not even daring to move. Where is this? Why am I here? What did I do? Ning Yuhi had just woken up from fatigue, but he didn't realize the seriousness of the matter. After the scenes from last night reappeared in his mind, his face gradually turned blood red, then slowly turned pale, and then turned into red. It must be a dream. I am possessed by evil spirits. Repeat this several times, and more things come to mind. Rules of etiquette. Master-disciple status. As a monk, he actually sleeps with his disciple. This evil disciple who deceived his master and destroyed his ancestors. Ning Yuhi's body tensed up, and then she began to tremble slightly. She hurriedly pushed the hand on her chest away and glanced down. The Shaogongsha, who had been with her for more than 10 years and should have been with her all her life, was gone. Already. Ah! A scream resounded on Dongting Lake in the early morning, scaring away the waterfowl parked on the bow and the fish under the lake. Su Buletinling shivered in fright, woke up instantly, rolled over, touched the sword placed beside him, and scanned the surrounding area with his eyes like an eagle. Master, what's wrong? Ning Yuhi panicked and picked up the skirt and hugged it in front of her. She kicked the man who had just embraced each other and slept with her feet and shouted angrily. Evil disciple! You actually! Su Buling looked around and found nothing strange. His consciousness gradually came to his senses and he put down his sword. Looking in the blink of an eye, Ning Yuhi, who had been hard on him last night, had a blood-red face, tears in his eyes, and kept shrinking back. The canopy of the boat was only that wide, and after shrinking for a long time, it was still in front of her. She bit her red lips and turned her head away, not daring to look at him, looking ashamed and angry. Su Buring was a little confused, wrapped himself in a robe, and came closer. Master, what's wrong with me? You, get out. Ning Yuhi's face turned red and he wanted to put on the skirt, but he couldn't do it in front of Su Buling, so he could only scold him angrily. Su Buling looked around. The boat is so big, and there is water outside. Where can I get out? Master, what happened to you? You were fine last night. Last night? Ning Yuhi was stunned. He remembered what he had done last night. He thought that the long-term pain would be worse than the short-term pain, so he forced himself on his apprentice. What should he do? Seeing Su Buling's blank eyes, Ning Yuhi suddenly felt a little confused and didn't know how to explain what happened last night. After thinking about it for a moment, a look of shame and anger appeared on his face, and he said coldly. Evil disciple, I am your master. I know. Su Buletinling sat cross-legged in front of him. You and I agreed last night. There must be no guilt, and his eyes were very calm. Ning Yuhi's breathing was rapid, and her tears rolled down again. She didn't dare to look directly at Su Buling, so she lowered her head and kicked Su Buling. Now that you know, why are you still treating me? Are you human? Su Buling spread his hands. Master, can you please be reasonable? I wanted to resist last night, but you still lectured me. What can I do? Ning Yuhi was speechless for a moment, and her mind was buzzing. It was indeed her sudden idea last night, and she just did it without considering the consequences. But even so, as a disciple, how could he be interested in his teacher? Ning Yuhi hugged her dress tightly and thought for a moment. I was confused last night. I regretted it in the end and asked you to stop. Why didn't you stop? Su Buling had a strange expression. Master, I've already done so much, how can I stop? Pooh. Ning Yuhi stared at the man in front of him and held on for a moment. Then he couldn't bear it anymore. In shame and anger, he picked up his sword and wanted to wipe his neck. Su Buling quickly grabbed her wrist and comforted her hurriedly. Master, why do you think it's all right? You made it clear last night and I listened to you. Why do you regret it at dawn? Ning Yuhi held the hilt of the sword, his eyes full of shame, and said incoherently. I am your master, how could I do such a thing, how could you do that kind of thing? Su Buling took the sword off and threw it aside. I've done it all. Didn't you say it last night? Long-term pain is worse than short-term pain. God's will is inevitable and there must be a marriage with me, so we should form a marriage first and then let me forget about it. How could you forget such a thing? Ning Yuhi's eyes were red, and she pursed her lips and glared at Su Buling, but she had no confidence. After all, she had exactly this idea last night, and an idea came to her. Su Buling sighed. I also thought it was a bit funny at the time. How could I forget such a thing? Isn't this a joke? Since you know, why don't you stop me? I stopped you. Master, you were very fierce at that time. You didn't say you were awake, but you still forced me to turn my face away. You kissed me and threatened me. It's hard to disobey the master's order. I really can't stop you. You obviously don't want to stop me. You are better at martial arts than me, so how can you not stop me? Su Buling opened his mouth and then spread his hands. I am a normal man. I have said that I want to marry you a long time ago. I can't resist you, so I will naturally agree. Do you still expect me to die rather than surrender? Ning Yuhi stared with his eyes wide open, and had nothing to say. The two of them stared at each other in silence for a moment. Ning Yuhi gradually calmed down, looked around, and said in a very low voice. Turn around. Su Buling nodded gently, turned around honestly, and turned his back to Ning Yuhi, wearing a robe. There were also sporadic sounds coming from behind, and there was also a very suppressed voice. Last night I was bad, I was impulsive. Not just impulsive, I almost used force. Su Buling felt weird in his heart, put on his robe, and said softly. Master, you were a little impulsive last night, but it seems that you didn't take Chinese medicine or drink alcohol, it should be voluntary, right? There was silence behind him for a while, he put on his skirt lightly, thought for a long time, and then responded in a low voice. I was voluntary, but I didn't think right at the time, my mind was very messy, and I didn't think much. Seeing that there was no one around, I was impulsive, just, now thinking about it, it's just crazy, you can't take it seriously. Then Master still likes me. What's the point of me liking you? I read a fortune before I went down the mountain. If nothing unexpected happens, I will have a marriage with you. But I accepted you as my apprentice for no reason, so this marriage must not be formed. Su Buling thought for a while, then turned around and said, when did the master like me? The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 390. In a blink of an eye, Su Buling saw Ning Yuhi wearing her belly band, and then she was hit on the face and turned back quickly. Ning Yuhi's eyes were panicked, he forced himself to calm down, and hesitated. I don't know, I am a monk, and I shouldn't have a relationship with you, but you saved me twice and looked at my body, especially which hexagram. I wanted to suppress these things, but last night, I don't know why. Ning Yuhi talked for a while, Her mind stabilized a little, and she bit her lower lip. That's all, that's it, the hexagram said that you and I are destined to have a marriage. It should be considered true now, it's still the same as what I said last night. From now on, you forget about it and don't mention it to outsiders. I am your master. Su Buling put on his robe, turned around and squatted in front of Ning Yuhi, raising his hands to straighten the scattered skirt. Do you think this is possible? Ning Yuhi took a few breaths and showed some determination. Do you agree or not? His eyes were serious, but extremely fragile, and it was obviously difficult to accept this unchangeable fact. Seeing this, Su Buling didn't push too hard and nodded. What master says is whatever it is, and I will definitely not mention it to outsiders. Ning Yuhi put on her skirt, closed her eyes and tried hard to forget about the shameful incident last night, and returned to her usual gentleness and quietness, but the strangeness on her body was still there, and she couldn't forget it, and 2 more drops slipped from the corners of her eyes unknowingly. Clear your tears. The sun hasn't come out yet, the sky and the earth are covered in gray, and it's still early. After Su Buling looked at the sky outside, he stood up and sat with Ning Yuhi. Ning Yuhi shrank slightly and moved to the side. Master, don't mention acting to outsiders. In private. Ning Yuhi opened his eyes, a little distracted. What do you mean? Su Buletinling got a little closer and pressed closely. On the surface, we are master and apprentice. Can we be alone when we are alone? Ning Yuhi understood the meaning and shook his head firmly. No, you have to forget it now. Su Buling was a little helpless, and instead of forcing himself, he said. Then let me kiss you one last time. Ning Yuhi frowned, a little angry. Don't even think about it. I am your master, we can't do that. I said this last night, master, but you didn't agree. Anyway, no one else knows. We kissed for so long last night. One more time and one less time won't make much difference. Ning Yuhi still shook his head, a little anxious. I was really confused last night, don't force me. Seeing that it didn't make sense, Su Buletinling directly possessed himself and got in front of Ning Yuhi. Ning Yuhi's body stiffened, her breathing became rapid, and she wanted to turn her head to dodge, but she was still kissed. Ning Yuhi closed her eyes tightly and curled her hands on her chest, obviously trying to block it, but in the end she didn't use any strength. For some reason, the impact this time was even greater than last night. After a while, Ning Yuhi couldn't hold on anymore, pushed Su Buling away, and wiped his lips. Okay, forget these things, we can't make any more mistakes. Satisfied, Su Buletinling stood up and walked outside the cabin, picked up the oar, hesitated for a moment, and turned back with some embarrassment. Master, I don't know how to row. Ning Yuhi was in a state of confusion. He supported his body with his hands and tried to get up, but his legs gave way and he sat back down, his face suddenly turning red. Would you like to rest for a while? No. Ning Yuhi didn't dare to be alone with Su Buling. He wished he could fly away now. He stood up and walked to the stern of the boat and took the oar. Su Buling originally wanted to sit next to him like last night, but Ning Yuhi glared at him. You go to the other side, or I'll jump down. Seeing this, Su Buling had no choice but to come to the other end of the boat and look up at the mirror flat Dongting Lake. He felt that this night was somehow a bit dreamy. Smoke has just risen from the long street beside Dongting Lake, and early rising vendors are selling chaos steamed buns on the street. The maids on the boat were also active, busy preparing breakfast and toiletries. As soon as the fish belly white light came on in the east, Zhu Manzi got up from the bed, put on the newly bought autumn dress, dressed up beautifully, then got off the boat and took the newly found sisters to a wonton shop on the street. Have breakfast inside. There is breakfast prepared on the boat, but the chefs in the palace are very particular about the food. They are not tired of fine food, and fine food, and they also have to take into account nourishment and other aspects. The taste is indeed good, but after all, it lacks a bit of meaning. Zhu Manzi lived in a rural town when he was a child. When he grew up, he became a policeman. He ran to the capital alone and wandered around the city all year round. I like to hear Mr. Shu's bragging in tea shops and wine shops, and I also like to eat ordinary market delicacies in various small shops in side streets and alleys. These can be said to be hobbies, or they can be said to be everything in life except finding parents. The first time I went out with Su Buling, I took Su Buling to eat the most authentic mutton in a basin in Chang'an. Even when walking around the world, I always talked about the big crabs in Dongting Lake and the vinegar fish in West Lake. In the eyes of outsiders, Manzi may be a bit greedy, but in Manzi's view, outsiders are too tired, and life should be like this. Xiaoning, this wonton shop is very famous in Yueyang. When it gets brighter, there won't be any seats. I've been here several times but haven't caught up. I wanted to get Mr. Su to come with me a few days ago, but it's a pity that Mr. Su is very busy. On the lakeside street, Zhu Manzi was wearing a warm white top with peach petals embroidered on it and a red pleated skirt. She looked pretty and charming. She walked in front and introduced the surroundings in a familiar manner. Ning Qingyi changed back into her usual white long skirt, with her long black hair draped behind her. She looked cold and uninterested, and was obviously still thinking about what happened in the Cao family yesterday. However, after Manzi kept telling her stories all night, her mood calmed down a lot. Last night, Ning Qingyi and Zhongli Jiju returned to the boat. She wanted to ask the master why he was mixed up with Zhongli Jiju, but unfortunately, she came up empty-handed and the master didn't know where he ran off to. It was the first time for Ning Qingyi to visit, so he didn't want to have a dispute with Su Buling's guests, so he ignored Zhongli Jiju and stayed in the master's room with Manzi. In the evening, Mrs. Lu and Xiao Xianger came back from shopping and found that there was another girl on the boat, so they naturally came to visit. Ning Qingyi had never met her before, and knowing that she was Su Buling's relative, she was worried that Su Buling's elders would ask about her relationship with Su Buling, but she was naturally overthinking. Thinking of the polite greetings last night, Ning Qingyi asked, "Manzi, is Mrs. Lu who came over last night Su Buling's elder? I saw that she was distracted the whole time, did something happen?"